Good evening, everyone. My name is Roy Kenzie, rapper and librarian from Teen Services at U Media and for Chicago Public Library. And today, for our Speak On It series, we have the pleasure of speaking with LGBTQIA plus activist, scholar, and author George M. Johnson. Speak On It is a program series connecting teens and authors virtually to have a conversation about what speaks to us and inspires us to create. We are encouraging all of our viewers to ask questions on the live stream, and I will ask George on your behalf during our interview. George M. Johnson is the author of the memoir manifesto All Boys Aren't Blue, as well as an HIV and LGBTQIA plus activist based out of New York City. They've written on race, gender, sex, and culture for Essence and The Advocate magazines. George is also developing a TV series based on All Boys Aren't Blue with Gabrielle Union. George, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good, good, good.
Yeah.
Um, I'd like to start at the very, very beginning just by asking when you were coming up, what were some of your favorite books?
Oh gosh, coming up, what were some of my favorite books? That question is always interesting. Because growing up in New Jersey, it's like if you didn't read books, like if you didn't read books outside of what you were given to read, then you were reading books about like white kids. So like we were reading what Catcher in the Rye, The Invisible Man, The Glass Menagerie. I actually did like The Invisible Man. I liked The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams. But I also, like the Three Negro Classics was something that we read. I can also say like one of my favorite books is The Four Agreements. Um, the Four Agreements is something that one of my college professors is what she used to teach in her intro course, and she was also my advisor. But it's one,
Right?
yeah, like it's just one of those books that no matter when you read it, it gives you something else because you're at a different place in your life. So yeah, definitely the Four Agreements. Um, and yeah, I'm very, very big on reading about like history and like slavery and like wanting to know like about our people and our ancestors outside of their condition. And so, a lot of times I'm reading like articles, the WPA articles on slavery. And like, I used to do that type of stuff too, like as a kid, like just reading articles and source materials a lot of times if I couldn't get to reading books.
Sure. Are you uh, much more of a reader than a writer? I mean, they always say that you have to read much more than you write if you want to be a writer, or you have to read a lot. So, do you read a lot?
I read a lot of articles. Like I am very, very big on bookmarking articles, coming back to them late at night and just reading through articles. I'm very, very big on like going through Wikipedia pages and going down like rabbit holes of like Wikipedia pages. It's like I'll click on like something that I wanted to know. Like just like a week ago, maybe about 2 weeks ago, like it was like, oh, I wanted to find out about like people who like sued to get out of slavery. And I believe they were called
Wow.
free. And but then I clicked on it, and then it was like it took me to this woman named Lucy Delancey, and then I clicked on her, and then it took me, and I just like literally for hours was just reading and reading and reading and reading, just about the history of like how slaves actually were suing to get out of slavery, and actually many of them were able to win their cases, and but that's just something that I just wasn't fully versed in. But yes, I do read a lot of like articles and rabbit hole things.
Hmm.
But I would say I do write more than I read
Okay.
because I am required to write a lot
Yeah.
because I have multiple books and deals. So um, there's not a day where I'm not writing something.
Great.
So yeah.
Wonderful. What were you like growing up? What were you like as a teenager?
Oh gosh, what was I like? It's interesting. Like if you talk to kids who I went to like middle school with, they would I don't know. It's like, I guess I wasn't, I think the connotation of popular means um, like looked up to in a way, right? Like everybody wants to be the popular kid. So I wouldn't say I was popular in that sense, but I was known by everybody. Like everybody knew who I was. And so I guess if you look at popular in the sense of does everybody know this student, that would be me. But that was because I got along with everybody. For the most part, like I got along with girls because I was sassy. And I could get along with most of the boys, even if they couldn't deal with how effeminate I was. I was very, very good at sports. And so I never got picked last. I always say that. I was like, I never got picked last. And I'm sure people wanted to pick me last because of how effeminate I was. And you know, most people could tell what I was by then. Even if we didn't have the full language to know what it was. But I was very, very good at sports. So I would say as a teen, I was pretty known, you know, school wise. I did have a hard time making friends though, that weren't girls. Like I always had friends who were girls. That was very, very easy for me. Friends who were boys or guys, that was very, very hard for me. So most of my friends were typically my cousins.
Mm-hmm.
Like my cousins were my friends, growing up a lot of the times, but I didn't have like a friend circle or a friend group. I didn't get like invited to a lot of the things that other friends did. So I ended up, you know, kind of rolling with my cousins, which is also why I was with my grandmother so much.
Mm-hmm.
Because all my cousins had friend groups, my little brother had friend groups. I didn't have a friend group realistically, so I just would be with my grandmother.
I love it. I mean, I didn't really want to take up and still don't want to take up a lot of space in this conversation because it's about you and it's about All Boys Aren't Blue. But I really just found it so fascinating how many things that I have in common with you, from having an aunt named Sarah, our conversation about our grandmother and the closeness with our grandmothers. There's just so much there, even down to what you talk about in the book, being you chasing masculinity. Can you expound upon your just your journey with making more friends when you were online and when you were crossing in your college years, and what your idea and definition of masculinity is now? Because once I got to that part through your whole journey, I felt it's like you went through this whole journey and was just kind of like, I've always been here. It's always, yeah. So can you
No,
talk
yeah,
about
that's very, very true. I mean, making friends now is easy, like, because I'm myself. So you know, people know what they're getting with me now. So it's like once you know what and who I am, it's basically it's on you, you know, because gonna, I'm not gonna like bring myself down a level or butch myself up, for the adoration of certain particular types of people in queer communities, where I exist, or heterosexual community,
it?
where I exist. So I can say though, like with the whole masculinity situation, especially in college, it was just something had been chasing my whole life because I thought it was something that I needed. I thought it was something that was the only way that I would quote unquote fit into society.
Yes.
Even knowing that I was a queer person, uh, you know, like you know, we see people who are queer or who are gay and who are cis who have a lot of masculinity, quote unquote, um, and they do it in my a lot of times it's done to assimilate. I mean, it could be who they naturally are. You know, I don't ever want to deny that someone is just naturally masculine the same way I wouldn't let anyone deny that I'm naturally effeminate. But I do think that masculinity is played up in spaces because of how we've been conditioned to think that that's like the acceptable image of the black male,
Yes.
and the acceptable image of, you know, people who are black and male presenting, and so I think all of that kind of goes into it. um I think in joining the fraternity though, like I was able to meet people who were like me and who were similar to me, different types of black men, as I identified back then, who were clearly, you know, gay and were clearly queer and clearly effeminate. And it was kind of like, again, like the thing I had been running away from, I ran right into. Um,
Yes.
because from that moment, I instantly had 8 new friends. and I had a circle, and I had people who I could talk to every day, and people who I could hang out with every day. And literally it brought me the community that I needed, but it brought me not just this community that I thought I needed of just Black men. It brought me much, much closer to the understanding that my Blackness was inherently queer, and that there was these queer circles of Black men that I could also have and be my family and love on, and who would love on me.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was very, very interesting, again, like trying to find masculinity. And I guess like now, how do I view masculinity? I don't view it at all. Like it's a myth. Like masculinity is a myth. Yeah, like masculinity is a myth, right? Like especially like when you're in queer community, like there are women who are technically masculine, right? Like there are like a lot of people can carry the ideals of what we believe is to be masculine. So masculinity, in my opinion, is a myth because the attachment typically comes to man. And it's like, but that's not the case, right? Because I, you know, identified as a man for a very long time, and I never had like what would traditionally be known as masculinity. But I'm sure that there are women who have identified as women for a very long time and have never traditionally had what was known to be femininity, right? So I think, once you start to, which again is why I'm all about like the abolition of gender, the abolition of constructs like that, because it's really just your energy. And I guess that's how I look at masculinity and femininity. I look at it as your energy. I don't necessarily look at it as like, can you fight? Can you throw a football? Can you like the way that it's structured and set up is just very like attached to things. And I don't attach it to things. I just say like your energy is just, it gives off one energy versus this energy, or like myself, a mix of energies. And so that's how I view it now.
Beautiful. That leads me to one of the questions that we had from our social media followers. They wanted to know, what are the differences to you between the terms gay and queer? How would
Ooh,
you
child.
define those?
There are a lot of differences. So the easiest way, this is how I'm going to explain this, right? I think gay is a box, and I think it's a very easy, not an easy box, it's a very simple box, right? When a person is gay, it is someone who identifies as a man who has an attraction to someone else who identifies as a man, and has sex with someone else who identifies as a man. Period. Bottom line, that's it.
Yes.
I look at queerness as it is the embodiment of all communities non-heterosexual. It is the embodiment of all constructs non-heteronormative. And it is the total embodiment of everything that has not been deemed normality in society. And so when you think about cis gay men, I'll say in particular, there isn't much that makes many of them different from heterosexuals besides the fact that the person that they choose to be with is a man. They still have the same ideologies around who the breadwinner should be. They have the same ideologies around masculinity, femininity, assimilating it to who's the top and who's the bottom. They have the same, they follow the exact same standards of heterosexual people, and they make that then work for them. Now, I'm not saying that that's not a way that you can choose to go, because you absolutely have the right to do that. But would I ever say that you then embodiment what it means to live a queer life? I would probably say no, because you literally are following the formula of a heterosexual life, but you're literally just simply gay. And I think queerness and queer people have a full or have a more of an understanding around around terms like butch queen, around like language, around lingo, around masculine and feminine energies. Like I think it's much deeper than that, right? It's also about like gender presentation, sexuality presentation, how you dress, how the abolition of men wearing makeup, the abolition of women or trans people, right? Like I think queerness is an embodiment of so much more than just the standard term of a person who is gay. Now, I do think that there are many gay people who are queer because they do embody more than just that, right? Just that they have sex with a man. But I do also think that there are a lot of gay men who would never identify as queer and who are just simply not queer because they literally do not embody the full life of what it means to be queer and to understand queerness and the breaking down of the constructs that put us in the boxes that we have to live in.
Sure. I mean, would it be a question between like uh who you're going to bed with and who you're going to bed as?
It could be very much so, right? Right, because again, like, which again is why it's problematic when straight people be like, I don't care who you sleep with. That's very that's very reductive,
Yeah.
right? Because my lived experience isn't boiled down to because I sleep with this person versus you sleep with this person, right? But there are many gay men who are fine with that, and that is why I say like queerness is a much larger conversation around in many ways abolition, right? Like abolishing of constructs and things. Whereas just like you said, like if a straight person could just be like, no, you cool because it don't matter who you sleep with. So the only difference between me and you is that you sleep with somebody that you sleep with men and I sleep with women. If that is the only difference, then we have a problem because our community has much like we just have too many other things that come along with being gay, you know what I'm saying, or being that queerness is a necessary descriptor for many, but also like that too many, I would say, cis gay men just ignore and just are like, yep, that's the only difference, like yep, that's my only difference from you. And it's like, so you're right. So like you haven't fully figured out your embodiment of your queerness, and that's fine. But I do think that there is a difference.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, I really appreciated the moment with your friend Kenny. Rest in peace, Kenny.
Right.
Of when you or when he asked you and you came out to him and you just felt so safe to do so. And then a couple days ago, you tweeted about coming out, and you also mentioned it in the book, just about how it's a thing that you always kind of have to do. So a question from another one of our followers is, basically about what you tweeted about coming out versus inviting people in. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I'm just very big on agency these days, and I think one of the things that we do sometimes we give power to other people to decide whether we're quote unquote accepted or whether we're in. It's like, well, I'm sorry to have to inform you of this, but because I'm already Black and I am already human, I'm already in. Like I am already in society, right?
Yes.
And I don't believe that heterosexuality is the norm. Like y'all made that the norm. But we know that, and I always use this example, it's like we know that wasn't the norm because even when people bring up the Bible a lot, like, oh, but the Bible said, it's like, okay, but let's also talk about the fact that you don't make laws for things that aren't happening. You make laws because something happened and you didn't like that it happened. So if there are all these laws against man laying with man and woman laying with woman, what do you think was happening? Do you think that everybody was already heterosexual and then out of the blue somebody was like, but just in case? It's like, no, it's already happening. And because it was already happening, someone who just happened to be in power was heterosexual and decided they didn't like that happening and made laws against it. And then it was an abomination. So it's like, when you really just break, again, that's why I'm very big on like, let's break it all down. If you break it all down, nobody makes a law for something that's not being broken or something that's not being done that you didn't like, right? So clearly what was happening was that queer people were existing and that man was already laying with man and woman was laying with woman and y'all didn't like it. So you made laws against it and made, passes against it. But you're not going to tell me that that wasn't happening, but you just out the blue was like, but just in case it does happen, let's just say, let's make some laws against it. Let's make some things against it, right? So, so that's why I'm always just like, I lost my train of thought real quick. Look, I'm like, What was the question? It was
Coming
about.
out versus inviting in.
I'm always like, that's why I'm always like, inviting in is the language I would like to use, because um we one my space is the safe space, right? And it's just like when you invite someone in your home, right?
Hold
And
on. Say that again.
like, yeah, like my space is the safe space for me, right? Like, that is my safe space, right? And danger happens when I invite someone. If like when you say you need to come out, it's like you have the power. Like, it's almost like you feel like you're owed that.
Mm,
Like, that you're owed this thing. Like, if you aren't heterosexual, you should have to tell us that.
mm,
You have to come out to us. And
mm.
that's just not okay with me. And it's like, no, I'm in my safe space. And if I feel that you have done right by me, then I will invite you into my safe space to let you know who I am. And I think one, that's taking back power, two, that's having agency, and three, it removes, in my opinion, it removes the fear of rejection,
Yeah.
because you can't reject me in my home.
Yes.
You can't reject me in here.
Yeah.
So if I invite you into my home and you don't like it, you can leave.
Yes.
But when you have to come out, quote unquote, it is, I'm coming out, and then they have the power to say, "Oh, no, we're not letting you in because your coming out is too much."
Mm.
Whereas when I am inviting you in and you try to say, "I don't like this," it's like, good, we'll get out.
Yes.
So that's how I like to view it. And even if it's the same things happening, language means something. And there's a lot of power in teaching kids that they have the agency to have power over the situations that are occurring to them. And so that is why I'm very, very big on like stopping the language around this whole idea that we are coming out to someone. I'm already in society. I am already Black, so I'm already in Black community. I'm already queer. I'm already in queer community. Um, so I'm inviting you into learning that your world that was taught to you wrong, and now you have to unlearn everything that you were taught, that you existed in this world that didn't include me, because I've always been included in your world. So now I'm inviting you in to our world to let you know that multiple worlds are concurrently existing together on this plane.
I love it. I mean, you kind of answered a question that I was going to ask around teens and having agency, kind of how you talked about jumping through personas. You answered that question already, but I'd like to ask why and how, outside of agency, uh, did you arrive at the decision to make this a manifesto as well as a memoir?
Yeah, when you really think about it, we've had queer storytelling for a while. Um, and people have often, and because I get this question too a lot, because like people are like, well, a manifesto means this and it means that. It's like, yeah, but it's a declaration. It's a, it's a powerful moment. Not just for me, but just for our story. I think that in many ways, you know, the idea of memoir is something for older people. It is something for once you have lived enough years, once you have done enough things, once you have gotten past a certain age point. Like, a lot of people will question me, like, well, you haven't even lived long enough. Like, and it's like I've lived 2 lifetimes in many ways. I've lived 3 lifetimes in many ways. I survive. I'm surviving an HIV epidemic as someone who's HIV positive. I am surviving a epidemic against Black people that has always been going on since I'm Black. I am surviving an epidemic against queer people that has always been going on since I'm queer. Like I've lived 3 lives. You know what I mean? And so it's like your idea of lived experience has nothing to do with the fact that I have already survived and continue to survive 3 different lived experiences, all totaled into one person and one embodiment. And so that's really what the manifesto part is because it really was the declaration of people who don't live in one identity, and a declaration of, and again, like, this is a declaration that's been made before, but it was one where the way that I am declaring it is also where I have empathy for my abusers. I have empathy um, for myself. I have empathy for my family. I have empathy for Black characters because the world doesn't have empathy for them.
Mm.
And I think in many ways, me decentering trauma and me decentering whiteness in a lot of my storytelling was very, very different for a lot of people. And I think that's why a lot of people were able to connect, because it challenged a lot of people, but it also didn't give the power to them. It was about taking back the power. And so I think that's where for me, it was like a manifesto in many ways. And I think that's why the community is receiving it. And let me say communities with IES, because it's hitting so many different communities, not just in the US, worldwide, white queer community as well. Like, I have a lot of white queer people who are like able to not only interrogate their queerness, but interrogate their racism and their anti-Blackness. And so, like, I think that is the part, because it challenges people who do live at double identities and triple identities, to have to interrogate how they're the victim, but they're also the abuser. And there's not a lot of text that does that work. I mean, there's a lot of text that does that work, because as Black people, we always been telling everybody that. But I think in young adult, this is one of those texts in particular that's doing a lot of work that, just based on the reception, I feel was a space that I'm glad to be helping carve out.
Oh my God, me too. Me too. Can you speak to uh, the racial conversation that's happening in publishing right now?
Yeah.
Or is it happening? Is this I mean, is it perceived? I just want to say that, All Boys Aren't Blue, as well as How We Fight for Our Lives, are two pieces of literature that I, held dear to my heart.
Oh,
Uh, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Is this a fleeting moment, or is there some lasting change happening in publishing at this moment?
I mean, I feel like publishing is interesting in many ways. I do feel like there's some changes happening. I do think like the whole publishing paid me conversation was extremely important. It was extremely important for the world to see how Black writers in particular, especially if you're a Black woman writer or a Black queer writer, how like publishing doesn't necessarily invest as much in us up front or during. And then also you get blamed if your sales ain't right. And it's like, but you didn't put the investment in me. So of course the sales weren't going to be right. But then, watching white authors out the box get 6-figure deals and 7-figure deals, and watching Black authors who have sold hundreds of thousands of books or millions of books still not get those same type of massive contracts. So I think it was very, very necessary. But I do also think that it is helping, because I personally feel that I'm seeing a lot more Black books at least get Black queer books and brown. Let me say this: Black books and brown books, like queer, heterosexual. I'm seeing a lot more people who are writers start to get deals. So but again, like, because even that's the first hurdle. So it's like, even if you're not getting the bag, getting the deal was the issue in many ways, right? But it's like now the bag still ain't where it need to be, but at least the deals are starting to happen, and more storytelling will start to happen. But I do think that it's important that books like mine, books like Felix Ever After, books like Cemetery Boys, books like You Should See Me in a Crown, like all the books Adam Silvera is writing, because Adam Silvera is always writing a book. He has so many. I think it's Becky Albertelli. Like, I think it's good to see like that queer books in particular sell. And I think it was great that my book was a nonfiction book. A lot of those books are fiction, and to be able to now prove that a Black queer nonfiction YA book can sell,
Yes.
is going to be extremely important, I feel, for the industry, moving forward, because it'll green like more true stories of ours. And I think that's what's necessary in storytelling, is like, a lot of times we have to fictionalize our stories. A lot of times we fictionalize our stories, even though a lot of the stories are true, right? And so I think that was the best, my favorite part about the fact that I wrote this book is that when you read it, I'm sure a lot of people at first are like, this is actually somebody's story. Like, this isn't like some made up character that George came up with and then put them in all of these situations to create a story. It's like, this literally was some Black queer kid's story. And I think that's the beauty of the book and why it's resonating so well, because it's like, not only do I get to get the story, but I get to then go to the Instagram and see what the person became. And I get to talk to the person, I get to meet the person and interrogate that. And so, yeah, I do think publishing's landscape is changing. I mean, I get to write more books. So if nothing else, I'm going to be writing more books. So
we're going to get all of them and read all of them. I mean, you did so well that this is turning into a TV series that you're working on with Gabrielle Union.
It is.
Can you talk about any of that?
Yes, not a whole lot. Because of COVID, I think things are a little bit. I'm trying to think how my lawyer puts it. Hurry up and slow down. It's like hurry up and wait. That's what she says. She's like, the term is hurry up and wait. She's like, hurry. It's like all this hurry, 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 and it is just like. And so basically, she was like, when we were going through the deal making, it was like emails, back and forth, and back and forth, back and forth for weeks, like boom, and then it was like deal done, announcement come out, and then it's like, okay, wait. Mm-hmm. And so that's something new that I'm learning about Hollywood. But what I will say is we are definitely working on it. Right now, it's looking like it's going to be centered around my college years, which was when I started to explore my sexuality. The show is more likely than not going to be modernized. I didn't necessarily want to do a period piece because so much has changed. But I feel like the themes and many of the things that I went through are still very, very relevant to today, clearly, as people are reading it. And so, I'm very, very excited. I get to co-write it. So we're working on finding a co-writer. I'll also be one of the executive producers. So I have a lot of say in making sure it's right, and that the HBCU aesthetic is right, and that the characters are right, and that we kind of really, really come up and do some really, really cool and amazing storytelling. Because there's a lot that goes on in college that I just don't think gets talked about, or when it does get talked about, it gets talked about from like a very interesting standpoint of like, I guess like it's being told commercially in a way, like in a cutesy way, like like we've all seen episodes of the girl that gets pregnant in college and it all magically works out, and it's like, but that's not college. Like, I think one of the beautiful things about storytelling is like when you get to tell it authentically, right? Like, what happens when your favorite character from season 1 no longer is there in season 2? Like, what does that mean? It's like, well, why'd y'all get rid of them? It's like, because they literally were no longer in my life. Like, that's real, right? And it's like, I know you may have loved that person, but that person has to go because that person literally is no longer in my life. And I think that's what I'm hopeful for about this, is because it'll really, really give that realistic depiction and like kind of pull at your heartstrings, like, oh my God, that was my favorite. And it's like, yeah, well, that was my favorite person too, until they that's very, very real. And I think people will resonate with that and some of the other stories, because clearly I didn't put everything in the book. So I'm excited to kind of tell the other parts that nobody knows, and then like have people watching and be like, wait, did that really happen? And I guess I'll just have to tell either yes, or I made we embellished, or like, no, that actually happened. So I'm very, very excited though. And I'm excited to be working with someone like Gabrielle, who's just very, very amazing, very, very supportive, and very, very knowledgeable about the industry and what it needs to look like and how it needs to look. And I'm really, really excited.
Congratulations. I had so many more questions. I'm gonna smash my 2 questions, or all of my questions, into like one last question, which is, you have 20 plus something tattoos.
Oh, okay.
One of them is on your right arm, and it's by Toni Morrison. Can you Tell us what that tattoo is and why you got it. And then the other part is for aspiring writers, um, especially teens, what advice do you have about starting the writing process?
Yeah. So the quote on my arm is, if there is a book that you want to read and hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. And that is pretty much how I live my life. It's like, well, if there's a thing that I want to see on TV and it hasn't been seen on TV yet, then I have to create it. If there's a picture that I've always wanted to look at and the picture hasn't been done yet, then I must be the person that's supposed to be the model for it. Like that's just how I live my life. But especially in writing, I find it hard to believe that we've reached 2020, and I am getting messages daily about people saying this is the first time I felt seen in a book. Um, Happy, sad moment, bittersweet, I think is the best word for that. Like I'm always so grateful that I was able to tell my story and that it is resonating with so many people. But I'm also sad because I'm like, how many years did you go? Like, because I mean, I'm talking people who are 75 have read the book, 80, like I actually did a whole panel with senior citizens, queer senior citizens. It was like 15 of them who had all read the book. And it was just amazing to hear them talk about the 50s and the 60s and not being able to come out and not being able to do, to move and talk about it freely, and reading the book and saying like, I've never read a book like this, or I've never felt so connected to a character that felt like my own. And so in many ways that, yeah, that has that bothers me a lot. um and I would say for aspiring, you said aspiring teen writers.
Aspiring writers, aspiring writers.
um Well, yeah, let me just finish off. So, like with the quote, that's why I do the work that I do. That's why I'm choosing to, like, I have a Stonewall book I'm writing. I have another book about my family I'm writing. There are just stories that are just not out there, and so I decided that okay, like these stories are not out here, so I have to write them. Uh, a lot of work, a lot of burden, because when you're writing stories that technically aren't there. Like they're out there, but they're not out there in the same way that it needs to be out there. Um, you then also take all of the weight of if something isn't right. You take the first hits, and then the people who come after you learn from your mistakes. But you got to make all the mistakes. So that's the scary place that it puts you in. But you know, Morrison was just a powerful individual who kept writing the story. So, we just kind of got to look to her and the Audre Lordes and the James Baldwins and Langston Hughes who wrote the stories, and just kind of got to keep writing the stories, right, wrong, or indifferent. You got to keep writing the stories. Not too wrong though, because too many people writing wrong stories. But and accepting, the critiques that come along with that. For any aspiring writers, teen or wherever you are, I always say that first step is to write. Like the first step is like at some point you just have to kind of take that deep breath and just start writing the words. Even if the words aren't in order, even if I think a lot of people think like there's some like magical structure to writing a book or writing a story. And a lot of times it's not. Like a lot of times I'll just start out with a paragraph, and then sometimes I'll build backwards, or sometimes I'll build forward. Um, a lot of times I'll know what the ending is and won't know what the beginning is. And so I have to work from the end. And it's like, well, I know how I want this to end, but how do I get to this end? So the advice would be, one, to just write. Like you have to, at some point, you got to just stop and be like, you know what? I'm just going to start writing. Um, Another thing of advice is I always work with like a skeleton draft, like outline in a way. Like I always like to at least try to outline my thoughts, and then I write sometime, or I outline my thoughts, then I write, and then I'll move stuff around. So never be too rigid to where you don't think it's okay to like move stuff around, change things, shift things. Like with the first book, a lot of things changed from how it started. With the book I'm currently writing on, a lot of things are changing from how it started. There's literally nothing wrong with that. Uh, let the book go where it needs to go. Let the story go where it needs to go. Don't be like so afraid to say like, oh, the story has to go here. Like if the story is not going there, then don't let the story go there. Go where the story is going and let the writing drive you, let the story lead you, and don't get so caught up in the brain, as I say. A lot of times we get caught up in the brain and in the head and the technicality of like, oh, but I needed to say this. And it's like, well, you can say that differently maybe. So let the story go where the story is going and follow the lead of the story, and don't get so caught up in the brain so much when you're trying to write your story.
Wonderful. Thank you, George. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today in our Speak On It series. And if you're ever in Chicago, please stop by one of our branches. And yeah, thank you for spending time with us today. We
No
appreciate
problem. Eventually we'll be touring. You know,
you.
every city is different now because of COVID, but you never know in the fall. I don't know. And I was just talking about this with somebody because I was like, I saw somebody say they were having an event at a bookstore, and I was like, I wonder if they're gonna do like book signings now with like 6 feet apart in mass. So I was like, you never know. Maybe the bookstores will be like, yeah, let's try it. You know, you never know. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm in Chicago and can sign books. So
Oh, we would love that. We would love that. Yeah, we will see you very soon. Good luck with all of your future endeavors. Thank you so much, George. Again, Speak On It is a program series connecting teens and authors virtually to have a conversation about what speaks to us and inspires us to create. Join us next week as we welcome award-winning author Fred Aceves to speak live on all things writing, creating, and geek out on books and more. Fred is the author of The New David Espinoza and The Closest I've Come. See you next week, and thank you for tuning in.